Today's guest is Suga, the founder of Hidden Gems Talent, an agency helping Singaporean and Australian startups build remote teams with top talent across Malaysia and Indonesia. A Yale economics grad, Suga spent a decade in private equity at EMEA and Cradle before walking away to bet on herself. The twist: Suga now runs an agency built on ruthless betting, a lesson that she learned the hard way. Some of her biggest fuck-ups were lowering her standards and making bad hires out of perhaps desperation, leading to constant churn and stalled growth. So today we dive into why smart founders shouldn't really take just warm bodies and the cost of a bad hire and the strict recruitment rules that Suga now lives by, because a good enough hire never is. Suga, welcome to the pod.
All right. Thank you so much, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here.
I didn't fuck up the start this time. Let's start with this, some of these bad hiring choices you made in the past. Maybe you could walk us through a few that still sting.
Yeah. So I started this business, more than a year and a half ago now. And, I had some insight into recruitment. I didn't come from a recruiting background, but I had some insight into recruitment. And I thought, hey, I think I could do this. And so my first hire was someone who had originally worked with me, and she's great.
Mm.
And so she kind of set the standard for what I was expecting with all other hires, right? And so what I wasn't prepared for was how hire number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 just didn't turn out the way I had hoped, right? And I think it's especially tough when you are recruiting for so many other people and making all these great hires, but then failing to recruit for your own team. Honestly, I think there were times where I just kind of wondered, should this just be a 2-person business? Like, are we just not capable of recruiting for ourselves? And
the recruitment company that isn't capable of, or wasn't capable of recruiting for themselves.
Yeah, because we messed up so many times, right? But I think what I tried to do with every mess up was to talk to the candidate who we were either terminating, or in fact, our first hire actually chose to leave us, and try and get feedback on what didn't work, why did that candidate want to leave us, or what is it that would have allowed the candidate that we wanted to terminate to potentially do better if we had to do this whole thing again.
Okay. Time out, guys. Lots of you are watching. Lots of you are learning from the founder fuck-ups that we've all gone through. But please do me one little teeny favor and subscribe so that we can keep growing the channel and get more great founders on. Back to the episode. So why do you think that, I can understand the first hire worked because, it was a previous relationship, someone you had built trust and worked with in the past. But why do you think 2, 3, 4, 5, you struggled so much? Was it perhaps the bar was a bit lower? You were just trying to get a bum on seat, get some work done. What do you think was happening there?
So I think a couple things happened, right? It was a confluence of factors. So I think first was in the case of our first hire, who we actually really liked, but decided, he wanted to build a career in another industry altogether. One of the big pieces of feedback he gave us was our poor onboarding. So we didn't do onboarding very well. I didn't come from a recruitment background, and I kind of tried to figure it out. And I had this impression that everybody could figure it out on their own. It's not rocket science, but there's certainly some nuance to it that you need to guide a new person on versus just trying to let them figure it out. I think the second thing for us is we're a remote team. So, that coupled with poor onboarding, I think some of our initial hires felt really lost about what were expected of them, how they could be productive and effective. And that's of course all on me, right? So the onboarding was a bit of an issue. But then I think what we were also testing for, when we started, I thought, hey, we need to test for maybe good critical thinking skills or someone who can figure out recruiting on their own. And then I felt, okay, maybe we need to test for like who has the grit to do recruitment, because it is it is a pretty hardcore job if you want to do it well. So, in one of the earlier iterations of our assessment, we actually put people through a 7-day trial period where they were given a job and then they had to go out and recruit for that role. And we had mixed results, right? With a very high drop-off rate because
Yeah.
a lot of folks were like, nah, I don't want to do the 7-day thing. But then some people had like limitations in terms of the tools they had access to complete the full 7 days and get results.
Yeah.
But then I also realized, it wasn't the most efficient use of our time to have people go through these 7 days. And in the end, it was only people who had a certain amount of desperation really who would do the
Take
trial.
that offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you were pretty comfortable in your existing organization, but then maybe looking for something more, the 7 days might be a bit of a put off. You might say,
Yeah.
hey, I'll just wait till something else better comes along.
So you feel that there was a combination of how you actually recruited internally? Because obviously for your clients, you're predominantly sourcing and screening, but your clients are making the hiring choice. So you were struggling with that internal assessment of candidates. And then when you were bringing them in, the onboarding was like, hey, we're all founders. We all can operate with that founder mindset to solve our own problems.
Yeah,
Do you
you're
think that,
absolutely right.
do
I
you
did
think
have
that,
that opportunity.
yeah, do you think that was kind of the primary reason why the first hires were just failing? Maybe bad expectations and not the greatest of screening at the beginning?
A couple more things I'd add to that is, one thing that I feel like you helped me discover, Ben, was I had this like limiting belief, right? That as a small company, with no brand, like strong people wouldn't want to join me, right? Like really great candidates may not want to join me. I definitely had that at the back of my head. And so I almost felt like I just have to like make do with the talent that I come across. I didn't have this belief that, hey, I can attract good talent and give them a platform to grow their career and really do interesting things here. I kind of was like, oh, I'd be lucky if I can get someone really good. So I definitely subconsciously had that belief at the back of my head also. And then one big thing I changed was I initially left my colleague to handle recruitment at the beginning because I was just like,
Your
I don't
number
like
two, your very
it.
first hire.
Yes. And she's great. She's great. And she's great. She did a great job, but that's not her job. That's mine. And so I had to take ownership of, she initially did the recruitment. She helped me with the onboarding. But I realized that's actually my job. I need to do the recruitment. And it was something someone else said to me, which was, yes, you may be a small company and people may not want to come work for your small startup, but they will want to come work for you,
Mm.
right? Like you are a factor that will allow them to decide whether this is a place worth betting their career on. And so I needed to be driving the recruitment process. And so I see this even amongst my clients, right? Some founders, even though they're 50 people, they still take that first call, especially if it's for a new role.
Especially for really important roles too. It's funny because I've heard other founders make this fuck up quite a lot, where it's tiresome to screen and interview candidates, and it's just I just want to go and sell. I just want to go. Cost of a mishire is so high that it is your job. You are like the head of recruitment. A company is just a group of people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
literally the definition. What? So you had this belief that made you lower the bar. And that belief was that because we're a small company, when you lowered that bar, and obviously I know that you've changed now, but when you lowered that bar, how did that actually impact the day-to-day of the business then when you brought in talent that was where you had lowered the bar for?
Yeah. So, okay, I'll give you an example, right? There was one candidate whom we interviewed who we really liked, who we thought, my gosh, this guy's great, smart. He even completed like our 7-day assessment. And we thought, oh, this candidate is great. But there was something in his CV. He had only been in his present role for a few months. And then when we asked him, like, why are you leaving this company? He gave us a very waffly answer. It was an answer that didn't really make a lot of sense. But because everything else checked out, I was like, all right, yeah, I mean, let's just hire him, right? When, you know, the answer he gave us on why he was leaving like really didn't make any sense to us at all. But what ended up happening with the candidate was he only lasted with us about 2 weeks, and that's because you couldn't find him during working hours. Like he just wasn't available. He would work a lot like after working hours, like after 8 p.m., after 9 p.m. And I suspected something was really off. We have an office in Indonesia, and he would say he couldn't come to the office on the designated office days. And so very quickly, especially in a remote environment, the trust began to break down. And, it was my suspicion that he had his own side gig going on, which is why I wanted to leave his company, wanted a remote role so he could work on both things at the same time, right? Yeah, and I think if I had maintained the bar, I would not have hired this candidate. Like, there's a big trust, there's a big question mark of trust from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have taken that risk.
Yeah. So basically, because the bar was lowered, you ignored a red flag.
Yeah.
A pretty big red flag. So what was the cost to you having this, lack of trust, like this person like showing up at 8 p.m. or whenever the fuck they wanted to show up? How did that actually then impact you? Did that mean that we undoubtedly care a lot about our businesses, right? So
Yeah.
did you start getting pissed off, trying to micromanage? Like what happened to your energy being sucked by this random
Man,
guy?
I gotta tell you, I think from from a work perspective, it wasn't that bad because I caught it, like I arrested the problem like within 2 weeks. So it wasn't like he was knee deep in a lot of work, and and then we had to now like find somebody else to take on that work. So from a work perspective, it wasn't too bad. But I think for me personally, that particular hire and fire really got me questioning my own judgment and whether I was even like cut out to be an entrepreneur. Like how did this happen, right? Because it wasn't an issue of competence; it was really an issue of character there. And yeah, I would say it took me a few weeks to bounce back and decide like I can still make great hires for my own team.
So the hardest part of this for you then really was that you second guessed yourself after that. And you're like, so am I even capable of doing this? How did you overcome that? Did you just go smack yourself in the face and go, you can do it?
Yeah, that's precisely it. I think I saw myself, look, if you don't keep hiring for your own team, then this is it. Then you draw the line here, and this is all this business is ever going to be. You have to have a little bit of faith that great hires are out there. I mean, I had one great hire with me already, and I had, just find the faith that there are other great hires out there, and just go back into the ring, right, and keep fighting. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Well,
honestly that was it. That was it. I was just like, look, and then I think one thing I told myself was, if I have to get through 100 failed hires to find that one great hire, I will do it.
yes. Good attitude.
Yeah,
Excellent attitude. I
I
mean,
was willing. I was willing to accept that.
my whole brand is found a fuck ups, but the purpose isn't to fuck up. Purpose is to actually learn from our mistakes. You made a mistake. I bet you haven't made that one again.
No,
Or did
I
you?
mean today, like the trust component of candidate is super important, right? Like when I talk to them,
Yeah.
I gotta be able to like figure out what are they looking for, what do they want, and can I give them what they want? If I don't have that sense, like what do you really want? Nah, I'm not.
Did you make any bad hires that perhaps come to mind, this still sting where it wasn't so obvious? Because on this case, like within 2 weeks, you exited them. It's pretty bloody clear. But there are other people that maybe our recruitment process didn't catch a skill gap, the competencies or critical thinking, et cetera, that are all really important, which then impacts performance, like day to day, morale of the team. Do you have any sort of turbulent hires like that?
No, I think with all of the hires, very quickly I could figure out if they were going to make it or not. Like maximum 3 months, usually less, right? You can see the signs. I think what's nice about recruitment is it's pretty straightforward whether someone's performing or not.
Black and white. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty black and white. It's like a sales job, right?
Yeah.
Like the metrics don't lie.
Yeah.
And so you give someone like maybe a month on their a month, to ramp up, but after that, the metrics don't lie.
Yeah.
And then you can also see, every day we have a team call, and you can see if someone's problem solving or if they're just like doing the same thing over and over again.
So when you're calling it for one of these, I guess, probationists, and they're not performing, is your methodology like just really looking at the numbers, letting maths dictate upon whether this person has made it or not, and then you live by that mentality, or fire fast, right? If the numbers are saying you're not a fit, it's time to go. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I wouldn't say just the numbers. I would say the numbers are one big indicator, surely. But the other thing I look at is what my colleagues say. So now with few people on the team, we've managed to hire a couple more. But I look at what my colleagues say, right? And then their input is also really important to me because they're grinding away and they can recognize if someone else is grinding away, if someone else is slacking, or if there are limitations or there are skill gaps, as you said. So usually I will flag it to my colleagues, or sometimes they'll come and tell me like, hey, we don't think this person's performing. In fact, one of the biggest fuck ups I made was I was leading this recruiting process for to build out my team, and then the way I do it is I manage the entire process, and then my colleagues do the last interview, right? As like a kind of culture fit interview, thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, so they do the last interview, right? Because I want to manage the whole thing and make sure all the gaps, because that really is my job. And so they do the final interview. And so with one of the hires I made, my colleagues had actually said thumbs down on one of the candidates I put to them.
And you still hired.
And then I said, all right, well, maybe we can give her another assessment. And I refused to just like accept it, right? I was just like, let's give her another assessment. And she did well in the other assessment. And then I was like, well, I mean, I think this assessment is really good. And I basically overrode them. And
You overrode your own process.
I overrode my own process. That's right. And I, kind of very subtly forced the decision, right? Yeah, that ended up being not a great hire.
For all the reasons that your colleague probably had given you. Why? Now this is interesting. Why did you make that mistake? Because that was, you built a process where, look, I'm going to screen and I'm going to own, but I want my team to like them too. I want them to buy in because they're in a great culture and good people are good people. When that person disagreed with you, your colleague disagreed with your assessment, why did you then feel the need to hold down your own bias?
Yeah, great question. So I think, if I think back to that particular hire, I got a little carried away by the story that she shared about, she come from a very rural town and, managed to get into one of the best universities. And I was just like, this is such a great story. This girl is such a maverick. And I loved that story. And I thought, man, I love people who kind of go against the grain and who try and forge their own path. And that really resonated with me, right? And I was like, I got to have her on the team, very independent minded.
So you got kind of sold on the story, and the story felt so powerful for you, it overrode your system.
Absolutely.
Maybe you would like reality TV, maybe.
I used to love reality TV. Yeah, but I think, I feel like I'm also pretty experimental with my hiring because I think in recruiting, you can have a system and a process, but it's not easy to box you can box quite a lot of people actually, but not everyone.
Yeah. So a lot of like bad hires, silly choices, flags ignored. What does it look like now? Like, how have you rebuilt that bar, right? We talked about earlier how you kind of, like many founders in the early stage, you kind of lowered the bar for a multitude of reasons. How did you lift that bar back up? How have you kind of really tightened the recruitment process so that now you bring in fantastic people?
Yeah, so I think big one is I own the process. So buck stops with me there. No, not outsourcing it to anybody. I think I've been pretty flexible on the assessments that we do. So maybe if it's a more senior hire, you have a lighter assessment and you wait more for their personality, their track record. And if it's a junior hire, then all right, let's see how you actually do on the job. So being very flexible on the assessments. and trying to be clear, what are you looking for? What are you really looking for? I think in the past I just wanted to test for grit and attitude, and I feel like that's something I'm prepared to give up on, and that it's not, you can't really test for that. You have to work with the person to really see it. I mean, you have some indicators about their professionalism, but attitude and grit, I think you really got to see. You got to
Yeah.
see it for yourself, right? Because different people perform differently in different environments as well. So I think giving up for the test for attitude, which is what we really tried to do in the beginning, then we focus on just critical thinking and problem solving. And that's the most important thing to do.
And how do you assess critical thinking and problem solving within your recruitment process? Is it sort of an offline thing? Is this maybe part of the interview questions that you ask?
So
Many founders struggle to assess candidates on.
yeah. So today it's like a 3-part process, right? So one, it's a first call, a 4-part process. So one's a first call with me where we really deep dive into the problems that you worked on, how you solve them, and see if they're just able to talk to you in detail about, the things that they had worked on previously.
Yeah.
That's a big thing I look out for. And then we have an assessment. So where we ask them to like solve for different things, right? Like I'll give you like 10 CVs. Tell me which ones you think are suitable for this job and why. I'll give you like interview videos. Watch the interviews and tell me like, what you think of the candidate, why. Come up, like it's a lot of judgment forming, right? So come up with judgment and how good are you at doing that? So the assessment is it's now a 2-3 hour assessment versus a 7-day assessment.
Yeah.
And then, but then what I do after they put together the assessment, they get back on another call with me where we discuss what they've done. Yeah. And in fact, that second call is so important because, one candidate, he had done the assessment and he had used AI, but clearly did it very well with AI because the answers were all quite good, I had to say.
Yeah.
But then the moment he got on a call, he couldn't explain so much of it. And if I didn't have that second call, he probably would have been hired.
Yeah.
And then after that, the final call goes to the team.
Okay. And do you now trust your team's judgment?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, they also get a say in whether someone passes probation or not.
Okay. Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. So everybody, a couple team members will be asked to weigh in on like how this person did during their probation. And then I take that into account when making decisions.
Kind of like a bit more of of course there's performance and things like that, but there's a little bit of a committee decision happening on passing probation as much as it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really like that you have the assessment and the kind of presentation of the assessment. So many founders will just blindly go, oh, that was good. And rather than pro, have them present, ask them questions. Because like you say, I like what you said earlier, like you asked about the problems they've solved, and if they can explain in detail, they normally have. And so if somebody can't go sort of 2 or 3 layers deep into the topic that they've just presented to you, they don't understand the topic. That's a very good way to stream out the naughty behaviors.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that, the other conscious choice I've made also is to hire junior folks rather than senior folks, right? And this is another limitation, but I've sort of consciously chosen to do that because I feel like we're developing a different kind of recruitment playbook here. And, if someone has worked at another recruitment agency for many years, the chance then they would first need to unlearn what they've done and then relearn what we're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this is also another limiting factor.
Yeah. So what do you look for then if they don't have necessarily the relevant work experience? Is it all about just how they solve problems, how they communicate?
A big part of it. And then also, look, tell me about, the biggest obstacle you face in your life and how do you overcome it?
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that approach. I think some of the best hires I ever made over the years were like long shots for me. I remember one of the best salespeople I ever hired, she was the single mother who was a virtual assistant when I interviewed her. And this is going to sound very biased, but my mother was a single mom who was a virtual assistant.
Wow.
When she's still a virtual assistant. And so, I don't know, I just was like, okay, you're cool. And she was very nervous in the interview. And I just went, you know what? I kind of liked her. I'm going to it was very nostalgic. I don't know. I hired her. She ended up being the best sales rep we had because she didn't have all of these pre kind of notions or or habits or training embedded. So when I trained her and coached her, like she took it on board, took the action, and she became the best performer we had.
That's
So
amazing.
though it was a weird reason why I hired her, it ended up being the best hiring decision I made.
No, I mean that really resonates, right? I think some of my bad hires were also long shots that I wished had turned out like your story.
Yeah, that was not a good reason to hire. That should have been a hiring fuck up.
No, but sometimes it does turn out so great.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think today I'm a lot more conservative. I think having been burnt, I'm a lot more conservative. I try to run this like, like you would in a proper corporation, and not let my whims and fancies like
Yeah.
dictate the process.
Yeah, we have to try to avoid that as much as possible. I think one of the best ways when you're a small team, and it's kind of what you've done, is you just make the process a little bit longer, right? There's the first interview, then there's the assessment, then there's the review of the assessment, then there's the meeting about the assessment, then there's the, having all those extra steps slows down the impulsive hiring choices, which I think is really good. If you were to, kind of the big lesson here for a founder, if you could imprint, pass this message along. If you're a founder who's maybe small business and maybe you just really need a bum on seat, or you need someone you're trying to hire, how can they avoid the same mistakes you made? What would you think they should pay attention to?
I would say two things. One, if you're a founder of a small team, then you've got to own the process. You cannot outsource it. Second, be very methodical about what you're looking for, about what either skill or attitude you're looking for. You may not find everything, but be methodical about, which ones are the most important, and then make sure your assessments, your interviews are geared towards finding those particular traits.
Good. Fantastic. See that? Thank you so much for sharing your story and coming on the pod.
Thank you for having me, Ben.